I first learned of Fran Gaulin through his work, and that was when I was at university in art school, and I moved into a new dorm room that he had occupied a year earlier, and found little figures crawling in between the cement blocks in those little the channels, and they were perfectly proportioned. They looked like what they were supposed to be doing, like the guy climbing up these lines. They were teeny, and I thought, wow, this guy's nuts. I need to hang out with him. And then we found out that we were in the same painting class, I think, the next year. And it was kind of cool because he was a great illustrator, and I like to think that I could paint. And so I would say, oh, you're a great drawer. And he'd say, oh, you're a great painter. And so we would, we fed off each other a little bit on that. Then he became a great painter, great colorist. And I continued to do what I did. But I think it's interesting to have him here tonight because we've both gone through some pretty crazy long career path changing kind of things. And a lot of them the changes had to do with opportunities that came up through technology that we took advantage of by using our natural abilities of creativity and things like that. So anyway, the surprise that got spoiled earlier was my first art show I shared with Fran Gaulin. And if I could bring that slide up, I guess I closed that very important slide earlier that we had up. So now I'm like totally ruining it by bringing it up slowly, but here we go. I'm not even going to do it. No, I'm back on this one. Yeah, we thought we were so cool. Where is my... There it is. So it's just such a big buildup. I wish I had music now. Anyway, yeah, so we got the university library art gallery, and we made a little invitation. And I blurred out the obscene parts. This is my illustration. This was done to tell you how old. This is an intaglio etching. This was etched into a zinc plate, and I pulled a press of it and used that image. I used the obscene parts. Not that. I meant the date down here. I didn't want anybody to see what the real date was because it was some people weren't born yet. But this was, you could see his eyeball. It looks like his eyeball still. Yeah. Anyway, that's Fran as a baby, and then I don't know what I was doing there. I was into surrealism as a kid. But anyway, I won't waste any more time on that. I've had the pleasure of knowing Fran. We've, like I said, crossed paths in so many different ways. We raise kids around the same age, and we get together maybe once. What is it? Every 10 years? So anyway, come on up, Fran. And
he was the coolest guy.
No, you were the coolest. No, you're the coolest.
He was the coolest guy. No, he really was.
You got a mic?
No, I don't.
You can take this if you want.
Okay. I'll probably need to get
You want the wireless?
coordinated. Probably. I feel like I could kill somebody with this.
We'll cut this part of the video. All right. Do you want to do that, or do you want to do this?
No. That's what I do. That's okay. Never been mic'd.
I never did this before. The whole video. Usually, just put it down your shirt.
Okay. How about in my pocket? I'll just shove it in there. Is it possible to dim the lights just a little bit too? Is that possible, Brian? So
I don't know.
Looks a little better.
There we go.
Hey. Hi, everybody. Okay, and I think I just press the buttons. Okay. Yeah. And is the mic working? Yeah. Okay. I think I got the buttons down now. Hello. How's that? I'm working. All right. Okay, my name is Fran Gaulin. Brian asked me to come here and talk to you people, so I agreed to do that a couple of months ago. So first, thank you for showing up, and thank you, Brian, for setting this up. It's been a wonderful evening. I'm currently working at Archaeact, and that's the game, the VR game that's out there in the hallway. Hopefully some of you got to try it out. I got to talk to a lot of you, and I found it really interesting. Anyway, Brian asked me to basically come, and he said, I said, okay, what's the subject matter? What do I talk about? Who's my audience? And he said, well, I think the thing that you could do is just talk about how you became an art director in games. And I said, okay. And he said, and make it personal. So he said, okay, I can do that. But this is the first time I've ever done that. So we'll see how it goes, and we'll have fun. And you can give me a critique later. There we go. So I've worked at BioWare. That was in Edmonton, Alberta, on a game called Dragon Age. I'm supposed to go to this thing up here, right? I see, you're just seeing the same thing, not my presentation. Here we go. Keynote live play. Is that better? Yay. I also worked with Capcom in Vancouver, where I currently am. I worked on the Dead Rising series, which was amazing. Oops, now I'm going backwards. What you're going to see is, sorry, go back. I'll get the hang of this. What you're going to see is a lot of production drawings. A lot of artists, concept artists, put a lot of stuff up on the web or on ArtStation, and it's highly finished. What I'm going to show is a lot more similar to what Ellen was showing, a lot of just drawings of how the game develops. And by the way, I am a concept artist and art director, but there's so many people that help me basically make this game. And really, I provide the little sketch, and they just bring it to life. Without the talented team of designers and programmers and animators and so on, I would never get anywhere. This is all I would have, and it wouldn't be much of a show. But anyway, this is where I currently am at Archaeact, and I'm now working in VR. And part of this talk is going to be a little bit about the different media that I went through in my transition. I was definitely not an early adopter of anything digital. I kind of went sluggishly, but I did adapt. And I think I want to share that story with you too, because there's hope for everybody if I can do it. And I think that might be interesting to you as well. So let's just get right into it. I always throw this slide up. Don't take my word for it. It's a caveat slide. Basically, especially with VR, no one knows anything. We're all kind of learning it as we go. I think, Ellen, you touched a little bit on that. And it's very important to you can't really overstate it. It's something that we're all discovering, and that's what makes it really challenging and why I decided to jump into it just 8 months ago. So here we go. This is me quite a while ago. I think I was about 14, but already at that age, I totally knew what I was going to do, and I wanted to share that a little bit. So I was born in Holyoke, Massachusetts, on the East Coast. And I think when I was 6 years old, we got to go from our school to the Wisteria Hearst Museum here and check out the Frog Circus. Well, it was actually a museum with a lot of displays, but I saw the Frog Circus and I said, what is this? It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And as you can see, it's taxidermied frogs in a circus. And they're riding on turtles, and I just thought it was really cool, and I had never seen anything like it. I didn't even know this could exist. I also didn't know that those were real frogs, but I could tell something was too good about them. So it totally delighted me, but it also piqued my curiosity. How did someone do this? And I had to look it up like literally a week ago because I remembered it, and found out again the whole backstory about this guy, Burlingham Schur, who was a curator at the museum and loved to teach people about animals, especially children. And anyway, he made this huge exhibit, and you can see little kid frogs there, and it's all kind of cool looking. And this really just blew my mind. So I thought it was amazing. And one of the things that it's kind of a topic or a theme for the talk is there. Basically, if you want to create engagement, I think in audiences you have to leave a little room for them to come in and let them use their own imagination as well. And I think hopefully you'll get a sense of that as we move along. Another big passion of mine was dioramas. I think you can kind of figure out where this is going. There was a lot of Revolutionary War museums and things and little plaques just about anywhere I went in Massachusetts or New England saying, you know, there was a battle here and there was a fort there. And there was always these little exhibits. And again, I thought they were really fascinating and I thought relatable today to the VR experience is that when you have a little tabletop of 3D figures, it really comes to life and you can kind of move around in it and engage in it. And I thought that was super interesting. The other thing that, because I was a modeler, and I was quite young, I was probably 8 or 9 when I started making them, and I got pretty good at it around 12. But I started to notice, this is box art, by the way, for the Anzio Beach kit by Aurora. And I was really into graphics and box art, even at a young age. And I was like, wow, this is a cool image. Man, I can't wait to bring this home and open up this total war scene here. And of course, when I got home, it was just a little pile of figures. But I started to look at it and I'm like, well, it's all there. I just have to put it together. But I started forgetting about this and started thinking about that, like somebody had to paint that. And I knew enough about painting, I guess, to see that it was some kind of oil painting and there's brush marks and it was all kind of suggestive, but there was this whole little story. And this fascinated me, I just kept at it. This is another kit, and all these I have to go online to find. It's not like I have them anymore. But this is Rap Patrol is a TV show, so I thought it was really great. But one of the things that, again, I was starting to notice was that there's a lot of storytelling in these images, which is why I was drawn to them. And in this one, you can see that the figures are, this guy drives like, yeah, and this guy is like, I got to shoot these guys. And there's just a lot of really cool illustration techniques going on with composition, with focus. It's kind of very similar to what Ellen was talking about leading a viewer through an image. And again, I just love this stuff. I couldn't nowhere near do this stuff at that age, but I found it really, really fascinating. So this is another image. This is environmental storytelling. And again, when I started to break these down, I'm like, wow, this is really kind of very loose brushworks, but I can see everything going on in here. And again, I'm very early age, but I'm just soaking this all in. I'm just basically learning. I put this up, if you read comic books, which I definitely did, you might recognize an ad like this. This is for a bunch of figures, and I put this up for a reason. You can see the illustration style, is a little downgraded. This is a set of figures. It was 132 figures, 2 complete Roman armies, and all for $1.98. Now this is a pretty good deal. And I think you can also see where I'm going with this. By the way, I never noticed this, but over here it says imaginary war scene. It's a little disclaimer just in case you get the wrong idea. Well, imagine your disappointment when you open it up and get something like this. And by the way, I have to point this out. The catapult, that you saw over here, these 2 huge catapults. I'm like, I'm totally getting this. When you open it up, this is the catapult. And that's the ammo, which was just green plastic balls. And you can see that I have up there on managing disappointment and dealing with media limitations. And this is, again, an important theme. We can't help but avoid this in entertainment. There's always basically something holding you back. In games, it's frame rate and getting essentially a video game to run in real time. I understand you had a Pixar artist here. And they do tremendous work, and they push the tech in amazing ways, but they have a huge advantage. They can render all of that content in render farms and just put the movie up. We have to render it in your home in real time on your console or your laptop or whatever. And we are always fighting that. In a way, though, I think it's kind of a good thing. But again, you'll see a theme. I'm going to blow through these really quick, but one of the things I also noticed was stylized and expressive artwork read very well. Again, they draw people in because there's a lot left out, and you fill it in. The audience fills it in. And again, I think Ellen, your drawings, totally basically prove that point. There's plenty there to just get involved with. Obviously, I love sci-fi. I'm just going to go through these quick. And I loved fantasy and the fantastic. And it's funny, I just kind of threw these together again off the internet. But these are all giants, like Méliès. This is James Bama. These were done probably in the 60s. And a very prolific, but not well-known illustrator. And he was absolutely amazing. The Harryhausen films, which were all puppetry, obviously Walt Disney, that's Bernie Wrightson, and that's a Frazetta painting over there. These are all well-known illustrators now. And this was absolutely the golden age of illustration. Also, all this media was sitting in your drugstore in a rack, or your local market. It was virtually everywhere. It was definitely the golden age of illustration. So made a big impact on me. This is my first hero, Jack Davis. His signature is in the corner somewhere. This is also something, a bit of a theme about changing technology and what happens when things shift in the world. And you really kind of don't notice it. It sort of happens on the edges, and suddenly it's just completely gone. Jack Davis, this is just a typical output probably for a month. This is a Mad Magazine cover, which is where I discovered him. That's a TV Guide cover, which was a prominent magazine in every supermarket, a weekly. The one right here is an album cover. This is a movie poster. Jack Davis was everywhere. And again, I'm about 14, but I'm picking up on all this. So I'm starting to think I really want to be an artist because this guy has to be getting paid. And I just thought he was amazing. So back to that. So I'm like, let's do this. I'm going to do the dream, right? And my first step was to get the Learn to Draw set, of course. So this is John Nagy. He was, does everybody even know who that guy is? No one. Two people, yes. So he was on television, but he was on only for a brief time, because I believe the show is from the 50s. He literally believed that anyone could learn to draw, and he sold this set, and I begged my parents, to buy it, and I knew if I had these tools that I would be an artist too, and basically be transformed into this beatnik artist figure here. So there you go. That's me at that age. So jump past college and my first gallery show with Brian, and I graduate, and because I'm near the New York City area, I start to get jobs freelancing illustration for advertising agencies. And because I can draw pretty well, and even better, fast, I start doing a lot of marker comps, or they're called comprehensives, or comps for short. And basically what they were ads where you just did everything. You did the illustration, you did the headline, and all on a piece of paper, usually a thin piece of tissue. You used markers. It was really fast and very smelly. It was very toxic. If anybody's ever been in that industry, I can't believe I still have any brain cells left when I really think about it. But basically I started doing this kind of work, and I did it prolifically. I did it every day for about 12 hours. And sometimes into the night. So I just learned to draw just about anything that they asked me to draw. And it was a great kind of education for me. this is kind of funny. This is the humble table tent. So nobody knows what that is probably, but back before we had video screens on our restaurant tables and big screen TVs, if you wanted to promote something like Johnny Walker Red Label at a bar, you would sit at a table, get a menu, and there was a tiny table tent about this big, so-called because it was triangular shaped. Someone's nodding, so at least somebody remembers that. And again, this is where we're seeing tech that's everyday tech that's completely vanished now, and this was in the 80s. And I made this. Someone said, oh, we need an illustration of a little ski lodge, so I did that. And I kind of got a kick out of it because it was fun. And by the way, too, the little drawings you mentioned in the hallway or in the dorm room, I was asked once to do a display that was about as big as this screen, about that high, for tequila. I can't remember what it was, but they wanted a Where's Waldo thing. So I just filled this whole thing with like a fiesta scene with little figures about that big. It took me about 2 weeks to finish that. So I continued to learn those skills I learned in the dorm room. I put this up really quick. I want to talk about engagement and narrative if you want to bring an audience in. One of the things, and again, I didn't think this would work. Somebody would say, we want a display and we want you to draw it up. We're going to sell chips and salsa, for the Super Bowl coming Sunday. And, we want it to look like a fiesta, like Mexican. I'm like, okay. And I did it and I saw it in stores and I'm like, well, it's actually kind of engaging. Again, it's 3D design. In this one, they're telling a whole bourbon story about the grain, and they have little grain jars. This sounds kind of primitive, for us now, because immersive experiences in museums and so on have really grown up. But back then, this was kind of the state of the art. But again, because we would go and see them in stores and check out to see if they were displayed correctly, I couldn't believe the reactions they got. They actually worked. So again, made kind of an impression on me. As we got better at this, my wife, Diane, and I started a company called Spret Design, or Spretteguben Design, actually. We shortened it because nobody could pronounce it. And we started getting a reputation where we could do these three-dimensional designs. So someone had an idea for KidWorks. That was the name of the store, a retail store, where it would just be essentially a kid's toy store, but it would be like a upscale Chuck E. Cheese. I think, shoot, I can't remember the name of never mind, we'll skip that part. But basically they wanted sketches of something that didn't exist. They were going to pitch this to investors, and I did these boards, and I'm starting to have a lot of fun. I'm like, this is really cool. This is way better than doing ads or table tents. And so we started to go there. And Diane ended up, my partner, who's a graphic artist, was highly skilled, and I learned a lot from her at creating spaces that people could basically engage in. She could lead the eye, and she often used curved shapes and colors and materials. And she would say, I need this, here's the sketch. And I would make it out of foam core or different materials, and we just started having fun with it. And again, I learned a lot. This is a great example. And another theme about bringing appeal, and I've showed you some box covers of model kits and showed you how enticing they are. In comics, the cover is called a splash art. In games, we call an image that's going to, draw you in, and it might be investors. You mentioned the pitch before. It might be people, waiting in line to figure out what movie they want to go to. But these kind of images sort of should be the summation of what you're hoping to present. So not very exciting, right? So we were asked by HBO to redo this trade show booth because it cost them a ton of money. That's a special big screen TV, which I guess in the 90s was quite expensive. And the whole idea here, this was for a trade show where all the buyers come and look at all the shows. And the whole idea was someone said, you know what, there's so much hustle and bustle on the floor. What if our exhibit will look like a hotel lobby, and it was an oasis of serenity, and people could go there and just check their phone or have a coffee. And they tried it, and it completely bombed because everybody was going there for the noise and the show, and this was like so dead. Virtually, that's what it looked like during the show. So they asked us, okay, what can you do to fix it? And Diane came up with this whole idea, and Diane had adopted to the Mac. She was one of the first people I knew who got the Mac in 1984. She got Photoshop, the very first one, and she just gravitated to it. She was very good with it. So this is, basically something where we just go over it and just do something like this. And again, I'm just showing this because it's materials that are really interesting, cool shapes. And again, really, really good demonstration of what I'm talking about. And I just want to show you here too, just a tip, pro tip. So square rectangles, boring, completely boring. They don't really do anything. And the other thing is you see through this space, and it's just this black vertical where I think they had a meeting room behind here, and nothing is drawing you in. Even Tom Hanks looks befuddled there. He doesn't know what's going on. But just by adding a few curves and hiding things and creating a space you have to navigate, and again, follow me all the way back to those dioramas. I think this is where I started to learn that what I thought was just cool looking at dioramas was actually, I think, a very human trait, I guess, where if you can get people to engage in a space, they're going to bring along, their history and their imagination. They're going to gravitate to the things they're interested in because you're offering things to them as they go through the space. And I just thought it was really cool. Let's move on. Live store. Again, this is a really good example of, signage, then something that hides half the store. So you kind of go like this, and then you're in the store and you're buying stuff, and we get another job from GNC, which we were doing. But it's just natural, and you see museums do this all the time. It's kind of sophisticated now, but back then it was really different. So September 2001, 9/11, this is something that only people in advertising really noticed because it was literally the next month. But this is post 9/11. Any magazine that you bought, Cosmopolitan or Playboy or anything, was fat with ads, right? There's some editorial content in there and some ads or articles, but most of it was ad space, and that's how they made their money. Literally the next month in October, it was like every single manufacturer, because they were nervous, the economy was already kind of shaky even before the event, but essentially advertising almost just dwindled to nothing. And all of these people that I was working with, photographers, illustrators, writers, you can imagine how big the industry really was, were out a job. And it was really interesting. Sorry, I should go back because I'm going to distract you with this one. It was really interesting. Look at me. So it was really interesting is all, for the first 2 months, we're like going to, let's have a drink. Oh, is your phone ringing? No, my phone is not ringing. How's it going? Oh, we're hanging in there. We had a little savings or whatever. And then about 8 months after that, we started meeting up. It was like, what are you doing? And it was maybe someone who shot videos, much like a lot of you, I would imagine, commercial videos. And they said, well, I started working on my film. I'm like, what film? Oh, this film that I was working on, I did a screenplay, and it was about 10 years ago, and I never really finished it. So all of a sudden, everybody started doing, stuff for themselves because there was no work anyway. And we started helping each other out. And it was actually kind of a cool thing where suddenly everybody was spending time on things they were actually passionate about. And it was really liberating in some ways. And in that process, a really dear friend of mine, Bruce Thompson, lent me his Xbox. He was going back to the UK for Christmas, and he had bought this Xbox. He was a programmer. I'm sure he'd be working in Silicon Valley today. But sadly, he's not with us, and we miss him. But he had bought this Xbox for his nephew, and he bought these 4 games. And he said, here, just play with it over the break. And I did, and I was blown away that suddenly video games had grown up, that they had really great graphics, that they had music, they had story. They were the next big thing. And I said, I want in. So I went to the Game Developers Conference. That's Ian McCaig, who's done a lot of the concept art for Star Wars. He had a one-day session. It was my very first session, and he inspired me, along with about 500 other people there. I said, okay, I'm going to do this. So again, I started working on, concept and my portfolio. So this is some animated storyboards I did for another friend. Brian and I helped out with that. I started working with some guy in Chicago who was certain that he was making the next GTA. And all of this is spec work. All of this is for nothing. But I figure, well, I'm not working anyway, or I'm not working very much. And I'll just, do it. And then I'll have work to show at the next GDC, which is the Game Developers Conference, by the way, right here in San Jose. So I finally get a job, and I move the whole family to Austin. I sell the house. The kids are really little. And this is my first game and some of my work over there. It's Wrath and Skeller, and I'm introduced to the Unreal Engine. And the team is very, very small, but they're very experienced. They worked at Midway and Unreal, which was later going to make the Gears of War series. And I start doing my little schematics, and they start turning it into art. And this is, again, where all those artists, super talented, are just taking, what I think are throwaway drawings and turning into something actually really cool. So this is about 2003, yeah. And, basically I'm just using all the skills that I had learned up until then. But I'm also drawing like mad. Like they're like, nah, don't worry about the color. Just jam in there and do the pencil work. And they like my work, and I'm staying there. And I, continue to work there because I was on a trial basis. And again, they're just thumbnail sketches, but they're really fun to do. Very collaborative. Always working with animators and designers. And then a chink in the armor happens. And remember I told you I was went to digital kind of kicking and screaming. So I'm asked to do this piece in color, and I'm not using Photoshop very much, and I do it, and it's pretty lousy. And I know it's lousy. Like I look at it now, I'm like, well, thank God I don't paint like that. But that's like the best I could do at the time digitally. So, I'm like, oh man, I'm going to lose my job maybe or whatever. But just to give you some, a little bit of what I should have been painting like, this was some of the work that John was doing next to me. So this is what was expected. So I had a ways to go, obviously. And then to make it even better or worse, like any business, I guess, the game business is an entertainment business, and it's very volatile. So our game gets canceled. So we've moved the whole family, sold the house. We're in Austin. And now, our whole studio future is very, very shaky. So in this part, I want to talk about a little bit about crazy ideas. And we're all kind of wondering what to do next. And John Mueller, the creative director, had been trying to learn how to play the guitar because it's Austin and there's music everywhere. And he's finding it incredibly difficult. And he's like, well, what if we made a game that was basically playing the guitar? Like we can make it that simple. And this is something that's really interesting about games that I learned there, is that games really are about fantasy fulfillment. No, seriously, not in the dirty way, but in the way where they make you, for example, the best F1 driver ever. They can make you the best basketball player, the best snowboarder. Basically, they're about empowering you. And I think that's one of the draws beyond the interactivity. So John has this inspiration. And this is John Root, who's his partner and a very talented animator. He's now in motion pictures. He did a lot of mocap work, and he's off and running and doing his own thing. Clearly the inspiration for that guy over there. And this was one of the first, again, pitch images. And I'm asked to do a guitar where, we can learn how to basically play the guitar using just simple button pushes. And so I come up with this sketch, and John turns it into this beautiful thing. John was, again, very talented illustrator, came from comic book background, but he was also a modeler and a texture artist. And even today, that really holds up well. It was very handcrafted, I thought. And if I push the button, I think these animate. Yeah, there we go. So this is Johnny Whatever, the character, and his guitar, and John spun up this whole thing about robo-bobbies, and it was, a London post-apocalyptic world, whole little story that I won't get into. And, we had all these effects, so we were basically taking the game and making it feel fun. So we had the visual hook, but now we needed to make it feel fun. And then we came up with these sort of, again, pitch docs or splash images, or in the case of games, key art, where we just encapsulate what it is. You're that guy, and you're a really good guitar player, and you use music to kill all these zombies and save the world. And then, sexy parts about what the game, how it was going to actually operate. So we pitched this for quite a while. And you can see everything that I had been learning up until this point was sort of coming together, and again, very satisfying. So this is just game screens. Then I got this idea, well, we need to show this to Microsoft, and everybody knew that. We're like, we need to get it to big publishers. And I think it was like 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, and the whole studio shuts down, and we weren't going to get a meeting, and we didn't have enough money for the end of the year. And there's a lot of pressure on the studio, and I said, I can get a meeting with Microsoft. And they're like, well, how can you do that? And I said, well, let's put all this stuff in a real guitar case and just send it to them post, back when you did that, FedEx. And we'll just send it to their top guy, and they'll open it up, and it'll blow their mind, and they'll call for a meeting. And so I'm doing that, and I'm setting it all up, and then I got an idea. This is the neck of a plastic guitar my kids had. And I'm like, oh, this could fit in there. So I put it in there, and I put a little whammy bar just for the hell of it. And we sent it out, and a week later they called and said, we want you to come and show us whatever this is. We don't know what it is, but come and show it. So now we have to hurry up and get ready for that. And we did this big thing. And the cool thing is, we knew we were going to be in a room just like this one, full of about as many people, maybe even more, and one head guy who sat like Brian, but right in the front, and was like, impressed me. I was like, well, what are we going to do? And I ended up taking the same guitar case, that's that blue thing over there, and I put all this on foam core and put all our images, which we had only worked on for about maybe a month and a half. And we walked in with our guitar cases, and I opened it up and started setting it up while they started pitching, and I assembled it in front of everybody out of these 2 little guitar cases. So a lot of showmanship. It was really fun, and we all had a lot of laughs after we did it, because I think it took a lot of nerve for essentially a bunch of, I wouldn't say inexperienced, because we weren't, but it took a lot of nerve to stand in front of Microsoft and show this and say, we can make this. It'll make a ton of money, guaranteed. Needless to say, it didn't work out. Some other company thought it was a good idea, though, and it probably became Guitar Hero. But that's okay. We were cool with it. But this takes me to my next chapter, and I'm going to go through 3 games that you saw a little bit of. Dragon Age at BioWare, which is where I'm heading here in Edmonton, Alberta. This was really cool, and this is where I learned about storytelling, and I thought that might be something that this group might be interested in. BioWare has this thing, Story Encounters, and BioWare is a story-driven game company. That's what they invest all their time in. How much time? Well, most games have 1 writer, and it might be freelance. Maybe they'll hire 6, back in 2004 anyway. BioWare had easily 10 writers. They had narrative designers, another 10 of those guys who just created emotional hooks, created really well-rounded characters, created dialogue trees, all this complex stuff. So for the first time, I was given a list of like what these spaces were and what was going to happen. Priests blessing the soldiers, berserkers, all these things were going to be built, and they needed some kind of drawing of what that possibly could look like to help inspire the artist. So I started again doing my Where's Waldo kind of stuff, where I would just kind of draw on a piece of paper until I got to the edges and then grab a new piece of paper. Is mostly how I worked for a while. And then I started to get a knack for figuring out where to focus my energy so I could get all this done. And you can see the drawing's getting better because, again, I'm drawing on pieces of paper for 12 hours a day. And as you can see, I'm also starting to add a lot of humanity, a lot of people and characters. And it was really, really fun, and I got great feedback from the group there, and it was really, really exciting to play with this. The other thing I started doing, which was kind of new, I mean, the internet was there, but I don't think the Google image search, which is the artist's best friend, by the way, we didn't have that. So you would kind of search for images, like, I don't know, feudal stable, and you would find someone's blog with 2 or 3 pictures, but they were, low grade. They weren't very good. These days, we have Google search up all the time, and it's an amazing production tool. But I start doing that. I show this slide because, again, sometimes I like ripping the curtain back and showing you that all the art, the finished art that you saw out in the hallway starts with scribbles. This is just about visual language, but this is for Orzammar, which is the Dwarven world. And, basically you just kind of do these little thumbnail sketches because they're very small. Again, those small drawing skills are coming into play. And then, again, I'm starting to stage and block the action. And I'm starting to do breakdowns, again, very similar to what Ellen was showing earlier. I'm starting to, figure out how puzzles are going to work. And also just starting to represent the themes and tropes. If this particular one that we've been looking at is a dwarven village, and, Elvish village, almost messed that up. And I think Lord of the Rings the first one had just come out. So if you didn't know what Elvish people were by then, up until then, you certainly knew now. And we had to make sure that all that was represented, that this was something people understood as Elvish. Yet we didn't want to copy, Peter Jackson's film, because we have a little bit of pride as artists, So, it was a tricky thing, quite challenging, actually. Matter of fact, I had Lord of the Rings art books, and I hid them so I wouldn't, accidentally steal from them. Certainly not on purpose anyway. So anyway, you can see where I'm just kind of going through this and having fun, but you can also see it's still in black and white, doing very little color. When I do color, it's very brief. And then a friend at BioWare introduces me to SketchUp Pro, which Google actually used to own. But it's an architect program, and it's the first 3D program that I can actually use. It's quite intuitive, and I start making these shapes and moving them around, and now you can see where the diorama slides come in. And again, I start painting over them in Photoshop and getting some of the detail in. And I still start with sketches, but I bring them in and start moving them around. And I'm working with the cinema group, the Cine team, who makes the cutscenes. And it's great because now they can import them and stage their actors and say, make these stairs bigger or whatever. But more importantly, I can kind of get a lot more drawings out of one week's worth of work. Before I'd have a drawing and it would be like, here's the drawing, and can you do another one but from the other side? And it'd be like, okay, I'm going to start over again. And this way, I had a lot more versatility, and obviously that's what 3D does. I'm also doing a little bit of character work, like femme fatales. This is a little bit about engagement and narrative. I'm doing, shamanic villains, and I'm doing evil undead monsters. And if you think back about, the kid with the slick leather coat, I'm in hog heaven because I'm just a little kid again and really having fun. So that brings me to the Brood Mother. The Brood Mother was going to be this big villain. It was I'll have to remember, it's quite a ways back. It was I think like a villager that had been corrupted and tainted and turned into this abomination, and she was going to birth like a brood of creatures and monsters. And I thought, oh, this is the big villain. We should have a really big reveal. So I did this little kind of cool thing where I'm like, oh, check it out. These little step frames. She emerges, and, it's all this neat stuff. This is a little bit inspired by, maybe I won't go there. Okay. I censored myself on that one. So I have a drawing there, and I'm like, cool, I'm going to hand this off to the modelers. This is going to be really fun. And they finish it, and this is what it is in game. And I'm like, I'm a little disappointed, and I had to get used to this. The translation from drawing to 3D at that time was kind of limited. And so, again, back to managing expectations. And I thought this was a complete fail. But I found this slide just the other day, actually, when I was putting the deck together and looking for images. And this is someone from Dragon Age Confessions. And I'm like, oh, okay, it was pretty effective, I guess. And I put that up because, again, what I didn't realize was I was just looking at my drawing and looking at the model. But what I didn't take into consideration was that there was a buildup to this, that the story writers were delivering, a bunch of beats, that there was music, there was going to be a poem or something that was chanted, that there was all this expectation, and it worked. And, I was like, oh, I shouldn't be so harsh. You have to let all the parts come together. Anyway, good lesson. So after 3 years of some pretty cold Edmonton winters, but really great experience at BioWare, very talented team, I decided to move to Vancouver, British Columbia. And I joined Capcom, who's doing this zombie game called Dead Rising. And here I want to talk a little bit about splash art again. This is The Promise, a mall full of zombies. That's going to be fun, right? And this is what the game actually looked like. But again, like the Brood Mother, people love this game because something that Capcom did really well is if there was an object in this mall, you could pick it up and you could put it on. You could, if it was closed, you could dress yourself. If it was this microphone, you could put it in a zombie's mouth. It just had all this interaction, and people really liked that. And it was a very special game. So we got a chance to do Dead Rising 2. And we decided to set it in Vegas. And again, this is the splash art. And let me see if you guys can, let's see. If I do this angle, that's me. And by the way, I have to explain, it's not vanity. Like, I was shocked when I found this out. We all had our head scans, everybody in the studio, to save money. And, I'm of a certain age where I was a little older than most of the 20-somethings in that studio. and they needed someone gaunt who already looked like a zombie, and I guess I fulfilled the bill or something. And I'm like, come on, guys, no, really, we're going to use you. And I'm the most prolific zombie character because we have about 20, I think, and you just always see me in there, which my friends thought was hilarious. But anyway, sorry the text came out a little screwy on this particular version, but that's okay. So you can see the main character here is some kind of motorcycle guy. And the other hook to this game was combo weapons. So what you would do is pick up a bucket, and then you would find like a drill, and you go abracadabra with duct tape. And that's what gaming does, is make interactions really, really quick with a button push. And you'd had something called a drill bucket, and you'd put it on a zombie's head, and havoc would ensue. You could do that with a rake and so on. And we had a ball. I think we made this game for about 5 or 6 years, and we would have to come up with crazier and crazier things to attach to things. But what I really want to talk about is Chuck Green, who is our hero, and how he developed, because I thought you guys might find that interesting, again, in terms of storytelling. So he started out, we said, well, we want a zombie slayer. And so he started out kind of beefy, and at one time he was even a smoke jumper, like a guy who jumps out of planes and puts out fires. And we thought, oh, yeah, he's going to have cool skills and a crossbow or something. Here he looks like a kind of famous MMA fighter. And we eventually kind of got to this guy over here. And again, it was kind of interesting. We thought we had something with the motorcycle guy. We're like, yeah, it's a capable hero. We had to make him somebody you wanted to play, somebody you liked, and somebody you can kind of get behind. So here he was, but we thought something was missing. He wasn't that relatable. And then a writer had a really great idea. It's like, well, what if you have to take care of your daughter in this outbreak? And we were like, whoa, I don't know, 4-year-old in a zombie outbreak, this, can we do that? And we had to really kind of consider it. And it was quite risky, but we did it, and it ended up being kind of an amazing win, way more than we actually anticipated. This is what she looked like, but she was essentially an emotional hook. One of the things this is some fan art too, and there's so much of it. So there's articles written, even though this game's about 10 years old, about what an amazing, emotional bond players had with this little girl who you had to bring Zombrex. She had been bitten. And you could get this special medicine called Zombrex, which was very hard to find. She needed it every 24 hours. So you could go around and do all the things in the game, essentially have fun with zombies, playing with them, maiming them. It's kind of a silly game, clearly. By now you've figured that out. But every 24 hours, you had to return to her and give her a little injection of Zombrex. And it kind of kept you, in that loop, and then story events would happen. So it was really, again, kind of brilliant, although we certainly didn't know we were doing that at the time. We just thought it was a neat idea. The other thing, though, I want to tell you about is that, I think it's the next slide. This slide is telling you basically that emotion and tenderness in game stories could be achieved. It was achievable. And most people didn't think that was so. But here's the caveat. It's interactive. So that will totally be broken by players as much as possible. They'll go out of their way to do it. And at first, we were really kind of worried about this. So you could get costumes and put them on, and you would bring the Zombrex, and that would trigger a cutscene, and you would have this stupid outfit on. We had the Borat suit, that yellow, we had all kinds of silly things. We had scary mask, and we were like, wow, this is, I don't know if this is going to work. But players liked that even more, that they were messing with the story. And we realized we really, again, kind of had stumbled onto something kind of cool. Now, this was in the original DR1 as well, but with this kind of emotional hook, we were a little worried, but it was a huge success. This is just a slide to show you what an art director actually does. So back to the guy, the beatnik artist. Sometimes art directors are perceived as someone with a beret in a director's chair going, make it bluer. But really, it's the entire staff that's actually doing a lot of the work. You're just trying to keep the whole thing orchestrated and the vision, kind of honed in. Sometimes it's like herding cats. There's days where I'm in great despair. And then literally 2 hours later, I'm elated, and that's pretty much how the day goes. But the devil's in the details. I do a lot of just notes and stuff. I must have had a slow week because I actually typed it out. Usually it's scrawled. But I just wanted to reveal that a little in case you guys thought that was interesting. And now, again, using my store design stuff to do these great little Vegas things, and SketchUp to do these schematics, which is making all the publishers and money guys really happy because they go, oh, it looks like they know what they're doing, and meanwhile we're like months behind on our production schedule, and we're working late trying to figure it all out. But if you showed people a picture, they just figured it eventually it would get done, and sure enough that was kind of true. Again, this is called Spaces and Places because the funny or interesting thing, and again, I love, Ellen, your presentation because it demonstrates the same exact sort of challenges, is when you're essentially presenting something, it's theater, you're staging it. You have to stage these events. And this is I think it's a Mexican city that we were going after here. And we're trying to figure out the pathing for vehicles and the areas you'd be nesting, because again, all of this has to be scalable, has to fit in the production, and we have to make it feel like a city, even though it's not going to be a city. We can't afford to make all that. But if you strip away the Mexican city part, basically what you have is metrics, is how much space do I actually need to create all these events. And it's always an interesting kind of little exercise, but I think you can, again, appreciate the little dioramas I was doing was essentially allowing me to learn how to do this at a very small scale. And I guess it also speaks a little bit about passion, and original passion specifically, thinking back to the Frog Circus, that if, all of you have passions, it might be fly fishing, it might be, it could be anything. And I think after raising 3 boys, actually now they're here, I think I also noticed that those original passions happen very, very early. You get imprinted. And I've been lucky to, well, first of all, to get the chance to I guess, recognize it and get permission from my highly supportive wife when I said, I think I want to go into games, and said, you should do that. Yeah, you're not happy. I'm not happy. You're not happy. Let's do something different. But I also have to give myself permission. I'm asking you to make sure when you're driving home or during the week to think about your original passions, because they are so vital. And I think when we are engaged in something, when we see a play or read a book or see a film or a performance and we're really touched by it, you're seeing someone's, original passion, I think, anyway. And I'm hoping that that's inspiring you a little bit. Awe and wonder is always a great thing, and that's about scale. And I want to get to evasion. Oh yeah, my paintings get a little better, finally. Even though now I have concept artists who can blow the doors off all my paintings, so I kind of go like, yeah, I'm almost done with the painting. What do you guys got? But now, let's talk about VR. And I use, by the way, it was Spielberg, right, who did Ready Player One? Amazing. We saw it as a studio at Archiact. I started there 8 months ago, didn't know really anything about VR. I knew as much as anybody else who read the trades did, oh, VR, it's coming. But Spielberg and this story, obviously it was written, I think it's a sci-fi novel, kind of showed us what the future's going to be, the promise. We'll get there. It'll take a while. There's no doubt about that. But I think it was a really powerful experience. And again, I think that's what great entertainment, great art does. So some of the features we decided to work on, by the way, the game was literally, I'd say 7/8 done, maybe 3/4 done when I got there. I had to just pull it together. I had to just kind of go, okay, as an art director, I've got to figure out how to tune these spaces and figure it out. The characters were already concepted by Bo Hao Wang, Sam Lung, two very, very talented concept artists. Lyle, was another art director who influenced the design. So I inherited these characters. So I'm like, okay, good. Those are done. Those I don't have to worry about. The enemies, again, same crew, had done a great job. We were still working on the animations. 360 combat, this was a new kind of thing for me. Again, games, you kind of know where a player is going to go because you kind of force them and you magically close the door behind them and they have to go in this direction. In VR, it was very, very tricky. And the other thing was the designers had designed characters or enemies that were flying around you, that were coming, on the ground, and so on. So, I had to figure out how to, make sense of all this. Also, I did a lot of work with the VFX artists. And this was also very challenging because we had to make all the projectiles stand out. We had to make them understandable. We had to make you as a player understand what was happening. Again, very, very challenging in such a short amount of time. But anyway, what we delivered on is eventually this, but I want to show you how we kind of got there. And again, I guess I should review these. You've been hearing this, and I'm almost done, so bear with me. VR versus traditional interactive experiences, and that could be a museum, which again have gotten very sophisticated now. But in a museum, obviously, embodiment and avatars, you're the avatar, you're yourself. In games, they have first-person games where you kind of just see your hands, and the camera is essentially you. In third person, it's when you see the character outside, and you're playing kind of removed from that person, which is, typical. In VR, again, we have an opportunity to essentially put you in a body. I know a few of you tried it, but how many people try the game? It's probably like 6 or 7. Oh, wow, that's pretty good, actually. One of the things for me that was transformative my very first day is I put the headset on and I'm like, oh, I'm a lady. Like I'm a lady in a spacesuit. This is kind of cool. And I couldn't help, kind of going like, wow, this is a new experience to me. So I thought that was very powerful and actually untapped. I think, oh, I should tell you about this. So we have a calibration screen, which nobody saw because we were pushing you into the game quicker to cycle you through the experience today. But in the game, we have a calibration screen because everyone is different, heights and proportions. Way more than we actually understood. And so what you do is when you get the game, or start the game, you're in black, and we had to basically transfer you to that body so it wasn't so shocking. So we put you in there, but you can't shoot or anything, but you see you're holding the gun, and you can kind of go like this. We also have a mirror, so you can see which character you actually are in that game. And it's kind of like that mirror thing where you go, oh, look, that's me. And we could only do it in that pitch black room because it's so expensive because we had to render the character 2 times and we could never do it again. We're always asking people, oh, in this reflection, could we see the character? And rendering engineers go, no, that's not happening. Again, because of limitations, but I think it will. So back to the calibration, what we had to do is figure out what's the tallest a person is. Okay, 7'8". What about, your 12-year-old niece? Yeah, we should put it, I don't know, 4 feet or something like that. So we had this huge discrepancy, and we found out, well, you could set yourself to 4 feet, and you'd be in the game, running around at that height, or you could set yourself at 7'8". So people could kind of experience what it's like to be a basketball player or a very short 12-year-old girl. And I still think there's something to that that I definitely would like to explore. Empowerment and controls is, again, back to the Johnny whatever. It's just about when empowering people, players, or viewers, to give them a sense of, I have agency, I'm guiding this. And again, the trip to the moon was a sort of interesting little experiment in that. And I think that has a lot of potential in the future. Movement and traversal. We were one of the first games to just go, you can push the stick and you'll move like a traditional video game. And the reason we were one of the first is everyone assumed that no one could handle that visually, that you would get motion sickness. And again, this was before I got to the studio, but a talented group of engineers and designers tried it. They just said, well, let's try it. And I'm going to go back to that caveat. There's no rules in VR. If you're interested in a challenge of your life, you can come in and basically start just like everyone else is in terms of, no one's way ahead of you. So you may have a really interesting idea, or you may bring something to the table. And I encourage you to think about that, no matter what you're doing. Spaces and places, I already talked about that, engagement and narrative. So that's a lot of words that have been sitting there for a while. So I'm just going to talk about this. Oh, I just talked about that. I was going to take a little video of it, and I didn't do it. So again, avatars reflect your body language. There's class and weapon selection. You can choose who you want to be. Again, it's odd, but back to the Dead Rising, if you said, hey, you can wear the red shirt or the blue shirt, people kind of dig that. It's customization and it's agency. It's like, oh, I'm making this choice. And if you can see your friend, which we were trying to set up and had a little trouble with, but 2 players playing in one game is really exciting, because as you're moving, you can essentially read your friend's body language, because subtly you're seeing them kind of hold the controller the way they do or stand the way they do. So you're essentially kind of puppeteering the avatars, and your friends can recognize that. And I think that's really, really interesting. Oh, another challenge, I'm wrapping up. We had 2 control systems. So for PC and Oculus and Vive, we have 2 sticks like this. For the PlayStation, we have either the controller or the aim controller that you're using out there. So we have to actually come up with multiple sets of controls, which is really expensive. You're doing something twice, but we wanted to do it. We said, why not? And we got good at it. Just talked about that. Head positioning and tracking are huge. It's something that's really, really challenging. It's very technical, so I can't really spend a lot of time talking about it, except that it gave us headaches all the way through production. And again, just to give you a quick example, you have head tracking here. It knows where your head is, and it just assumes the skeleton is following wherever that is. And then it has your controls, and it kind of triangulates that. And again, because we're human and all virtually different in minute ways, it drove the engineers crazy trying to get the camera to understand where they were. Because I think there's even something in Unreal, you flick a switch and all you see is 3 dots instead of the player. And those 3 dots are what the game thinks you're doing. And we would get spaghetti arms. We would get the gun flying out of your back. You know, all these disasters. Our blooper reels are really fun. Someday we'll put them up. And I think I'm kind of done. Oh, this is, we're done. It's late, right? Should I keep going? It's like a few more slides. So this is just me, you know, this is what it looked like when I got there. And, you know, I'm like, okay, paint it up. You know, let's bring this out, bring this color, pop this out, make the flag a little brighter, you know, stuff like that. Just visual targets for getting things to read a little better. That's where it ended up shipping. This was the game, you know, with lighting and everything, and I'm like, it's still not quite there yet. And we just saw, what if we had moon rays? What if we had this? Let's direct the eye. That's kind of how we ended up. More boring art director things, you know, make it look like that, but sci-fi. Use these textures. A lot of reference gathering. Thank you again. Google image search. It's so awesome. It's so awesome. You know, narrative. Our writer, Peter Bochuk, hope I pronounced that right, spent some time in the Yukon. That's where he grew up, in Faro. And so he named the mining colony Faro Mining Conglomerate. Came up with these signs and decals to just kind of tell a little story. So we turned something, you know, that was okay, you know, into a little bit better, a little stronger on the narrative side. Whoa, okay. Let's skip all this stuff. Thank you. Oh, I'm ending with this. I was going to call my talk Persistence of Vision, but it went sideways. But I did find these, I think they're called, well, zeotrope is one word. My notes, oh, they're not showing up. But this is a device that a French inventor, I believe, created. And it's a disc. It looks just like what you're seeing when it's not moving. And you can see the little slits right here. And it was on a stick, like a pinwheel. And you would go to a mirror, and you had the artwork on this side, so you couldn't see it. And you spun it. And you would just fixate right here where the slit was, and it would animate like this. This is what you would see, and there's a bunch of these. They're really interesting. Turn of the century, around Méliès's time. And the reason I brought it up was because there's because the slits are like this, just like projected frames in a motion picture camera. Basically, what's happening is you see an image and then black, an image and black, an image and black. And they call that persistence of vision. So I did a little research on it because I thought, oh, that's such a cool name for a talk. I'm going to use that. And I found out that actually there's a huge argument. And back in the, I think, turn of the century, they said, yes, it's the image being reflected on the back of your retina. And there's an after image. It's latency. Basically, it sits there, and then something moves like this. And that image blends, and they call that, you know, it was an eye trick, essentially. But within a few years, doctors and physicists were saying, no, that's not how it works, because the image is actually formed in your brain. So that's complete horsewash, you know, hogwash. And to this day, they're still arguing about it. Nobody really knows. But I put it up there because, again, it's kind of my theme. If you create a little space for the audience to imagine the motion, engage the viewer in whatever you're trying to do, I think that's when we get a win. And it's really important. Everybody thinks, you know, when you see a movie, you sit passively and you're not really engaging in it, but it's totally not true. Even the illusion of that movement is purely happening in here. So always keep that in mind no matter what you're doing. And also keep in mind, nobody knows anything. It's, they're just guessing, I think, most of the time. So thank you very much. Thank you, Brian.